Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are now live, and I am joined by the one and only Debbie Richards. She is a returning guest. I am so happy to have her back on because she is an award winning filmmaker. She has been in this game for quite some time. And, ladies and gentlemen, she knows what she's doing. She's very knowledgeable. Make sure that you go and subscribe to her YouTube channel. We will get the name of that before this podcast is over, but you definitely want to subscribe to her YouTube channel because, again, she is a wealth of knowledge. She has been in this game for a long time, and she is a returning guest. So, Deborah, welcome back to a conversation with. How are you? How are you? How are you?
I am doing amazing. Thank you. It's so good to see you.
Yes, it is so good. It is so good to be seen, and you have been very busy.
I've been making feature films nonstop, full time since 2021.
Wow.
Since 2021.
Okay, so you are deep. You are deep in it, which is absolutely amazing. But before we get to that, how about you tell everyone how you actually got started in the business, because that is an absolutely fascinating story.
Sure. So, where to start? I feel like I call it my Slumdog Millionaire story, because at the end of Slumdog Millionaire, when the guy knows all the answers because of his life experiences, I kind of Slumdog Millionaire my way into directing.
Mm,
Right? It was just I had all the ingredients in my life to be a director. I got my first video camera in like very early 80s, and soon followed by a Mac, an Apple, and the desktop revolution and the digital revolution has been this backdrop to my life. So I just kind of went through that. I was a musician in my teens and got a job at a recording studio, which was the beginning of nonlinear editing for like MIDI and music and sequencing, which led to eventually NLE, nonlinear editing for video. But also, I played with pixels my whole life. I
mm.
built my first website in '88 when the web started, and been using Photoshop since it switched over to color. And so I had all these technical digital skill sets. But then also I was a bartender, and I would listen to people's stories at the bar, and I would tell stories at the bar, and I'm a very people-y person. So I had all this kind of technical skill set, and then also this kind of, that intangible emotional storytelling stuff, a lot of life experience. Um, and it just all, if you had to say on a resume what makes a film director, it's a little bit of all of that.
Hmm. So you won a couple of awards. Those things called Emmys, ladies and gentlemen. So how did that happen? We've talked about this before, but there may be some people who are just tuning in that that they're not familiar with your Emmy win. So can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Sure. Let's see. I was in film school at the College of Southern Nevada in 2012, 13 ish. And basically, I won 4 Emmys in the student category that year for a short film that I made in film school. And I won them for, I think it was Best Short, Best Director, Best Editor, and Best Screenplay.
Hmm.
And it was very exciting. I had no idea that that was even a thing when I was making the short. And it was actually made over 2 semesters. The first semester was a writing assignment called Boy Meets Girl, which is a pretty standard writing assignment in film school. It's like X amount of pages, Boy Meets Girl. That's the only direction. And I started mine off like, 10,000 years from now in space, next to a sun. I was like completely, everyone else is like boy meets girl at a bus stop or boy meets girl at a restaurant. And here I am really, really stretching for this. And then the next semester in a production class, I was like, I'm going to make this. And so I made it. And at the time, it was impressive for its scope and the fact that I was trying to do stuff in 0G and I was shooting in 4K when 4K wasn't really, it was just becoming a thing, but not so much for students. And yeah, it got me a bunch of attention, and I won the Emmys. And then I thought I knew it all, and so I dropped out of film school, and then I found out I knew nothing.
Okay, okay. But you know what? With that, with you dropping out of film school, and I'm guessing having a somewhat of a bumpy road because of what you didn't know, do you think that that path you took led you to become the filmmaker that you are today?
For sure, for sure. I think if I had stayed in film school, I would have entered into the industry after film school at a slightly different level.
Hmm.
But by exiting when I did and freelancing the way I was doing, I wasn't entering into the film business. I was just freelancing on Craigslist. I was just like, wedding videographer or someone to take photos or whatever it was. I would go after every gig. So I did these really low end gigs for years. Um, but I really learned how to be resourceful, and it kind of it schooled me really in guerrilla filmmaking. And in film school they're like three sandbags on a C-stand, but in the field sometimes when you're running and gunning in guerrilla, a foot on the C-stand will do. So it taught me how to be a really scrappy filmmaker, but that
Hmm.
was in the kind of lower end of the production world, in the muck and the mire, and which has served me really, really good to become an independent film director and filmmaker. But had I stayed in film school, obviously it would have been a different path. I think I would have entered the film industry at a higher level, but I wouldn't have necessarily been the scrappy filmmaker that I am today.
Okay. So let's talk about something outside of film, but is directly connected to film with this documentary that you just did. You used to be a bartender, but you were a flair bartender. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. I used to flip bottles for a living. I started my Flair bartending journey started at TGI Fridays in London very long time ago, and then I came to America flipping bottles, and then Vegas called, and that's what brought me to Vegas 25 years ago or so now. So yeah, it's been a long journey, but yeah, I was a flair bartender. I competed all over the world. I got a couple world titles and a couple national titles, and it was a lot of fun.
Okay. So can you explain what a flair bartender is? Because I, in my travels, had seen people behind the bar, doing what they did, and I had absolutely no idea that that was that serious of a business. So can you explain to everyone what flair bartending actually is?
Sure, it's kind of hard to pin down because there's not an exact definition, and different
Mm,
people will give you different definitions. But the one that's always that I've held close for a very long time is that flair is the art of making a drink with style.
mm,
Now, whatever that means, whether it's a little thing or a big move, or throwing bottles around, or just doing something swish with a straw, whatever it is, if you're making a drink with style, then that is your flair. But traditionally, what people think of flair is like bottles in the air, tins in the air, stuff in the air. So popularized by Tom Cruise in the movie Cocktail, but it's actually been around over 100 years. So it's a very cool and dynamic thing if you haven't seen it.
okay. So what made you want to do a documentary on that particular profession?
I think this is a good time to talk about film business.
Oh, that's my book.
Yes.
That's my book. Oh, that is so cool. You got me with that one.
Well, it's coming back to the film business because one of the hardest things in making a movie is connecting with an audience.
Mhm.
The film business is the only is the
Go get that book, ladies and gentlemen.
it's the only industry in the world where you say, hey, let's all get together. We're gonna bake a pizza. You get the ingredients. You get the money for the ingredients. I'll put the oven on. Blah blah blah. We make a pizza, and then we go. Does anyone want a pizza?
Mhm.
And it's the only business in the world that has that backwards mentality model. So if you can connect to an audience from day one, it's such an easier ride, right? So our production partners had 13,000 emails of flair bartenders, And that was enough for us to greenlight ourselves and say, hey, let's make a documentary about this because, and the funny thing is, I always said I'd never make a documentary. But the other crazy thing is your films choose you. And when that opportunity fell in my lap, I was just finishing up my last movie, and 80% of filmmakers only make one movie. And I was so desperate not to be in that pile that I was like, let me capitalize on the momentum of my first movie. And here is a gift from God of here is a world that I know. And also here are some production partners with a massive database of grassroots audience who have never seen a film like this. So that was enough to greenlight ourselves and say, hey, let's make this movie.
Okay, so when you say they had 13,000 emails, were those just customers? What was that dynamic?
Sure. A long time ago, I started one of the first ever Flair Bartending websites in the world.
Okay.
And I sold that to a friend, Rob Husted, who took it over. And then he became a production partner with us on this film. And those emails were gathered from Flair bartenders all around the world for years and years and years going to that website.
Okay, so how did you choose and decide who would be in the documentary? Because it was an extremely interesting documentary. So how did you choose the people that were actually in the documentary?
Sure. So we had to come up with a basic plan of what the structure of the film would be. I knew that we would film it a little bit verite style, and so therefore some things weren't like, it's a documentary, it's not predetermined, right? Things are organic, and that you got to give them space to breathe and grow and develop. But we needed to start the journey with a basic understanding of what the structure would be. So we decided to follow 3 Flair bartenders as they prepared for a big competition in Florida. And then we would intercut that with notable bartenders from around the world who could comment about the overall world of Flair and its history and its past and where it might be going. And our 2 production partners are legends in the bartending world in their own rights. And so we basically said, who are the hottest bartenders in the world today? And because we're based in Vegas, we put the condition that they have to be in Las Vegas because, Vegas is a hot spot of Flair anyway, so that wasn't hard. But they had to be here because, God forbid they broke a finger or something, I could get in a car, drive and film them, chase the ambulance with the camera. So we wanted to have that easy access to them. So we basically said to our production partners, who are the best in the world that live in Vegas, that have different personalities, and that's how we picked our 3 principles.
Okay, so the people in the film, I want to concentrate on the women because, as with so many other things, Flair bartending is a male-dominated. I will call it a sport because they call it a sport. It's a male-dominated sport. So when you were talking to the women, I could see in a couple of the situations where they got upset because of some of the hurdles that they've had to overcome when it comes to Flair bartending. And with you being a woman yourself, I'm sure that you could relate to that. So what was it like getting a female perspective on the profession of Flair bartending? What was that like?
Well, I thought it was really intriguing that it was such a boys' club. And I've always wondered, why? What is the connection between flipping bottles and attracting young men, right? So that's why I wanted to speak to the girls in the sport and try and unlock what their passions are and what drives them to do it, and try and find the commonality there. It's great because they spoke to the broader subject of what it's like to be a woman in hospitality. But I was really also very curious about what are the commonalities between these people, whether they be male or female, that drives them to be so competitive and fearless. And so I found that fascinating.
Now, you know what was interesting when I was listening to it. One of the gentlemen in the documentary, he said something, and I wonder if it stood out. He said women are more concerned with doing their nails.
Right, which is such a
I said, now, I said, okay. So now, were you actually there filming that part when he said that? He said women are more concerned with
yeah,
doing
yeah,
their nails as opposed to the men who are more driven. I said, oh, okay.
yeah. 98% of everything in that movie is me
Mhm.
behind the camera.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
so yeah, I was very much there. But it's funny because sometimes in the moment when you're
Mhm.
shooting, or when I'm shooting at least, I'm so focused on making sure that the sound is coming through good, and that the frame is good, and that the lights are good, and that there's nothing weird in the frame, like, over here there's a, lamp hanging down or something in the background or something distracting. So even though I'm hearing stuff, I'm not necessarily fully processing the full depth of what they're saying or the weight of what they're saying. And also you got to remember that we're shooting, like, each interview is like maybe 3 hours long.
Okay.
So for example, Lindsay, one of the principals, Lindsay Palumbo, who's an amazing Flair bartender from Vegas, you should have her on your show. But we had 26 hours of her that I then had to cut into 15 minutes of final footage, right? So when you're doing all these shoots, like, sometimes it takes a while until you're back in the edit bay, and then you're actually listening to them, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, they said this or they said that," and sometimes I find myself thinking, "Wow, I wish I was a little bit more present in the moment at the time, because I could have maybe asked a follow-up question
Hmm.
on certain things." And you try to be, but there's a balance between the technical and the artistic, and also you're processing in real time. How is this all going to interconnect as part of a cohesive narrative? So I always think filmmaking is like playing three-dimensional chess.
Mm.
And certainly when you're shooting for a documentary, because you're just shooting, and you're not quite sure where it's going.
Okay. So the way you did it, the style of the documentary, because sometimes you'll actually hear the person off camera asking questions. So why did you decided to do it more, and the way I saw it, as them narrating how Flair bartending went, as opposed to someone actually sitting down and asking questions?
Sure, I had a very clear intention on day one
Mhm.
that I wanted to spotlight Flair bartending. I didn't want to show it in a bad light. I didn't want to show it in a good light. I just wanted to put a spotlight on it and let people tell their story in their own words. And while there's a little bit of the auteur's touch in the way that I edit and interweave that, but I think overall it's a pretty light touch, and it's more focused on you know the people in the film telling the story.
Yeah. And what was interesting, I learned so much just by listening, and I was very surprised, because if you go out and you see people twirling the bottles and flipping things behind their back, you're not really focused on how much skill that actually takes, until I started listening to each of the bartenders talk about the amount of injuries
Well,
they
that was
suffered.
it's not just the skill; it's the amount of danger.
Right. So can you talk about, even from your own experience, just how skilled you have to be? Because again, when they were talking about some of the injuries they suffer, I was sitting there like, are you serious? You think they're just flipping bottles, but you're not really taking into consideration that you're flipping bottles.
Right. Well, it's funny. Like, if you catch two juggling batons in one hand, it doesn't matter if they touch. But when you grab two bottles in one hand, you have to, let me see if I can kind of demonstrate with pencils and pens. You actually have to catch, one in between your fingers and the other one
Mm,
over here, so that the glass doesn't, when that bottle comes, because if you went to go like that, it'd smash. So, it's just so dangerous.
Yeah, I was very surprised. People gashes in their head. The one gentleman was talking about when he dropped the bottle on his ankle, and it went in 2 inches. Then the gentleman was talking about, I tore my bicep, and I had to. Well, I don't want to give too much of it away, but he was saying I had to crazy glue stuff back together rather. I'm sitting here saying, now wait a minute, this sounds like football.
I had 11 staples in the back of my head from a bartending accident. And now the only side effect is I can see into the future.
Okay. Okay. So how long did it actually take you guys to film? How many days?
The movie took 3 years.
Oh, wow.
The entire time that we were in post on Move Me No Mountain, we were starting to shoot and starting that. Yeah, it took 3 years from start to finish. Over a year in post production. I recolored the movie 3 times because I just wasn't happy with it. And I think by the time I got to the end of coloring it, my eyes were so wacky that I had green people, and I'm like leaning over saying, "Hey, Pat, what do you think of this?" And he's like, "A bit of green."
Mm.
So, staring at something for so long and working on something for so long, and we're such a small team that my judgment kind of went out the window, and I had to take breaks and come back to it, and then it was very obvious what was wrong, and so it took a long time in post. I wonder how many production days. Patrick, any idea how many production days roughly was? How many actual shooting days for Chicken and Stud?
35.
35 production days roughly.
Wow. Wow. So a total of 3 years. Let's talk about that, because that is a commitment.
Yeah, and the weird thing about the commitment is it's the commitment you make to your own motivation. Because when you start a project, everyone's full of beans and really excited. But when you get to the end of the project, well, it's not even the end, it's just the start of the next cycle of life of the project. But now we're at the point where I've been working on this so much, so long. The last thing I want to do is talk about it, but the first thing everyone else wants to do is talk about it. And I have to talk about it because I have to promote it and stuff. But
Right.
trying to keep your motivation at that peak level over a long period of time is really quite a thing with filmmaking. It takes a certain level of insanity, I think.
Yeah, and again, the commitment, and the thing about this business, Deborah, is if you knew what it took going in,
Yeah,
you would not do it.
probably not.
And that kind of goes to it, the fact that one film, one documentary, 3 years of your life. There aren't too many people that would sit down and say, "Hey, are you ready to make a 3-year commitment on something that might not work? It might not get distribution. No one may never see it. Are you willing to?" And that to me separates the people who really. I always say this is not a like type of business. If you don't love it, this is not the business for you. And that just goes to show that this is a business that you love, because 3 years is 3 years.
But some of those fears that you were saying about doesn't work, can't find distribution, and none of those ever a thought or an option, because of course it's going to work, because if it doesn't, we'll keep bashing it with a hammer until it does.
Right.
And of course it's going to get distribution because we're going to make it good. And if it's not good, we're going to keep bashing it with a hammer until it is good. So those aren't, it's more the challenge for me, and I think a lot of people, is just keeping that level of motivation up throughout, because there's some dark times. I mean, there was from November till the premiere a couple weeks ago that I think we were working pretty much 10 hours a day since November till about 2 weeks ago, every day, trying to finish it up, get everything, I's dotted, T's crossed. So that's really tough. But the crazy thing is, we started the next movie a year ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Well. Hey, look, if it works for you, if it works, it works.
I think I heard somewhere that Matt Damon, when he broke on was it Good Will Hunting,
Hmm.
I think for the next 7 years he literally did not stop working. He was working every day for the next 7 years. And when I heard that at the time, I was like, how can that be? But now I understand because literally since we started moving a mountain in early 2021, I have not stopped making feature films full time, all the time, and I'm pretty committed to the next 3, 4 years.
Hmm. So, do you think with that, because of the fact that you have not stopped working, do you ever think to yourself, Debbie, if I sit down, then I'm not getting back up?
Probably. There's a good chance of that.
Mhm.
I wouldn't like to test it, just in case I don't get back up. But no, I definitely get days off, right?
Mhm.
I definitely, sometimes I hit a wall and I'll work half a day and just hit a wall. And you got to listen to your inner voice. But for the most part,
Mhm.
I'm mostly work all the time. I'm just really driven. Actually, I haven't celebrated Christmas, New Year's Eve, or Thanksgiving in a good 4 years,
Oh
or my,
wow.
or my birthday.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I've been working on all of those constantly. And I tell people, like, if you want to get into the film industry, you're competing with people like me, and I'm sure there's people even more fanatical and driven than me, because there's only so much I can do at my age. I get worn down and get tired. But it's a fierce business, and you can be like insanely driven to compete at that level.
Yeah. So let's talk about the business of this business and having something with phenomenal production value, and how extremely important it is to have a piece of work with phenomenal production value, because it's something that you're going to take to market. So if there are filmmakers who have decided that this is what they want to do and dive into this world, why is that important?
Well, there's many things important. Okay,
Mhm.
if you take a film like Forrest Gump and you say, why is Forrest Gump a great film? It's a great story, great production value, great acting, great sound, great. You can go through a checklist of all the different things, great transitions, great jokes, great moments, great sequences. It's just great throughout, right? So the goal is always, that, not just production value. You've got to hit the mark on every beat, right?
Mhm.
Um, and there's something called the gap, which is what you see in your head versus the film that you make. And the better of a filmmaker you are, the smaller the gap, and the worse the filmmaker you are, the bigger the gap, because you have
Mm.
this vision of what you want to do, and yet it doesn't turn out like that. And someone like Steven Spielberg, very small gap, if any. And that's what we aspire to as filmmakers.
Okay. So now, what's next for Shaken and Stir? What are the plans?
Right. So it's really interesting. We decided. Well, we kind of had a pretty finished rough cut early summer last year,
Mhm.
and we spent 6 months speaking to distributors, and we got about 20-ish offers, and we went through all of them, and we decided not to take any of them, and we decided to self-distribute. um, Now, we've never self-distributed before, and we wouldn't necessarily self-distribute our next movie, but for this film it made complete 1000% sense because we had a grassroots audience built in,
Mhm.
and digital distribution is so easy now, that we decided to do that. So we had the premiere 2 weeks ago, and it's now available online at flairdocumentary.com. And it will be available exclusively through that website while it goes through its festival run. And then it will be on Amazon, then iTunes, then Tubi, and then maybe 3, 4 years from now it'll be on YouTube. So there's a whole slow rollout.
Okay. So So AJ sent me an email. So you guys are going to be doing something with it in June, a screening in June.
Yeah, it's been selected for the Nevada Women's Film Festival. So I think it's on the Saturday night of June 21st here in
Okay.
Vegas, which is obviously home turf for us. So I believe AJ is coming to that, and which coincides with her anniversary. So very excited for her. And yeah, we're excited. Nevada Women's Film Festival, I had a couple shorts, I think, in there, and we did a test screening of Movie No Mountain at the Nevada Women's Film Festival. They've always been super supportive of me, and they actually honored me as the Nevada Woman Filmmaker of the Year in 2022. So I'm really excited to have a film in competition again this year,
Mhm.
and really looking forward to it.
Okay. So there was a young lady in the documentary. She did the competition. She wasn't happy.
Lindsay.
Lindsay. Okay. Is she still competing?
She is, and she's still teaching women Flair bartenders, and she's a real powerhouse in the industry. She's really blossoming into, first with her trainings, then with
Hmm.
the film, and now with her competition organizing and trainings. She's really blossomed into this, thought leader in the
Okay.
industry, which I love to see.
Okay. Okay. So again with the women, since the documentary has come out, has there been an uptick in interest as far as women saying, "Hey, you know what? I've always thought about it and wanted to do it, but I never really had the courage to do it, for lack of a better word. But now that I've seen this, I'm diving in."
Yeah, well, it's really hard to say. It only came out 2 weeks ago,
Oh
so
wow. Okay.
and I've been buried in a little hole of doing press and stuff. But what you just mentioned is actually my sincerest hope for this film and its legacy, because because of Tom Cruise making Cocktail, I flipped bottles around in England and ended up 30 years later interviewing the guy who taught Tom Cruise how to flip bottles. So it was such a full circle moment for me that I realized, wow, this film has the potential, like 20, 30 years from now. I guarantee you there'll be someone in the world who saw this movie, got inspired to flip bottles, boy or girl, got into it, got a job, moved to another country, got married, and all because of this film. And I'm really excited about the legacy. So I'm excited to see how that pans out. Maybe it's my hubris, and maybe I'm giving it way too much weight. But Cocktail had a big influence on a lot of people, and I think this film will equally tickle that, cave woman part of our brains that likes to see things flipping around.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I don't take that as hubris because art really moves people.
For sure.
And there could be someone, as you said, young lady, young man sitting there, and they may have seen Cocktail and say, you know what, I can't do that. And then they see your documentary and they're like, well, wait a minute, you know what? Well, maybe I can. Because here's my thing, and this is something that I always say. What is the worst thing that could happen? It may not work, but it might work.
Or with Flair, you could lose a finger.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could, but you know what? Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
There you go.
So what's next on the docket? Because you were saying that you started shooting something else.
Well, not shooting. Even though it takes 3-4 years for me to make a movie,
Hmm.
the shooting part is a very small part of that.
Okay.
So we've been in development of our next film for last year, and we hope to shoot it next year.
Okay.
It's a horror called Scissormouth, and it's loosely based on a 5,000-year-old Japanese folktale.
Oh,
It's set in Texas in the mid 80s, and it's a female driven thrill ride about the cruelty of vanity.
wow. Now that sounds interesting.
And we're going to shoot it in either upstate New York, West Virginia, or Poland. And we have a $1.5 million budget, so it's a big step up for me.
Okay.
And we're very, very excited.
Okay. So with the step up in budget,
Yeah.
is that a direct correlation between the work that you've done that people have seen that would have them say, you know what, this is a great return on investment. I'm gonna do that.
Well, I think it's a combination of things. It's after a few movies, you're starting to prove yourself that you can deliver a movie, right? Because that's one of the biggest questions with investment in films is, well, is the movie going to get done? And I made a habit of always finishing every single project I've ever done, and that's actually what got me the opportunity to make my first film, because I had that solid reputation of finishing what I started. First-time filmmakers who say, I'm going to make a $30 million movie or whatever, it's just pie in the sky. It's just not reality for so many reasons. But as a filmmaker, you want to, up your game each time and go a little bigger. And it's not necessarily about, making a more expensive movie for the sake of making a more expensive movie. It's way more calculated than that. It's when we made Shaken and Stirred, it was very calculated. This is the audience. This is what we're going to deliver to them, and this is how we're going to do, marketing and how we're going to make our money. With Scissormouth, we have an opportunity to be theatrical with it and make a sizable chunk of money. But in order to do that, we have to put a lot of investment in. So it's really, you kind of look at the opposite end of how you want to, where your movie's going to play, how's it going to make its money back, and what size movie, shape movie, and you kind of reverse engineer it from there.
Okay. The business of film.
The business of film. You can't have movie business without the business, and you can't have the business without the movie.
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, and that's one of the reasons that I wrote the book, because you would always have filmmakers talk about, what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. Yes, that's my book, ladies and gentlemen. But then you would ask them, okay, so what's the plan?
Yeah.
What's the plan? What do you mean, what's the plan? Well, what's the plan?
Yeah, what's the plan?
What's the blueprint? What are the steps to get you to that end game? And they would be like, well, I didn't think about that. So I'm saying, so what you're saying is you're going to spend your money, and you may spend someone else's money, but you have no idea of the steps that you need to take to get it to where it needs to be, to get it distribution, to get it hopefully profitable, to get it seen. You didn't think of any of that? No. Well, then you don't need to be making a film, because you're about to waste somebody's money. And if you want to waste your money, go right ahead. But if you're involving someone else's money, these are things that you need to do. And that is one of the reasons that I decided to sit down and just write a book for, beginning filmmakers and intermediate filmmakers who may understand how to point a camera, but don't understand the business of this business. Because at the end of the day, it's a business. So
yeah, 1000%. I mean, we're so steeped in the business side of it. Even though I'm a director, and Patrick sitting behind me as a producer, I still have to drift into producer world, like maybe 30%, and Patrick drifts into the artistic world maybe 30%, and we have natural crossover. But sometimes you just have to. There's so much on the workload that sometimes you just have to say, hey, I'll take this, you take that. And you can't be fussy about whether what you're taking on is artistic or producing. It just has to be done. And that's part of the indie filmmaking spirit, that you take on a lot. And, but yeah, you gotta have a plan, man. You gotta have a plan.
Yeah, you really do. You really do. So what's next on the horizon? You said you have a film in development, but besides that, what do you guys have going on?
Well, it's interesting because we're I'll be promoting Shaken and Stirred for the next couple years.
Mm-hmm.
We're distributing it, so we're doing all the marketing for that, and our marketing is it's pretty complex. Like a lot of the bartenders in the movie are influencers, so we make these postcards with
Oh,
each
nice.
different bartender on them,
Well, that
and
is
then
so cool.
they have these QR codes. So when they give them to people at the bar and people scan the QR codes, they get 10%. And so we have bartending schools in Milan, Cape Town, London, Paris, and Rome that are distributing these. And so that's just a little snippet of some of the marketing stuff. But that, even while we're making inroads into our next film, we still have to juggle those items and keep that machine moving along. So while we're doing that, I have very specific steps coming back to the plan, got very specific steps that I have to take with the next film. The first bit, which I'm most excited about, is shifting gears a little and getting into the creative.
Mm-hmm.
And while the screenplay is production ready, I feel like it just needs a little bit of, and I've had time now to think about it and stuff. And so I've got to, isolate, make sure the screenplay is absolutely as buttoned up as it can be. From there, we can then figure out the budget. From there, we will then get some seed money. So I gotta, kiss babies and shake hands to get some seed money, and then we will raise the majority of the money from a Regulation CF crowdfunding, which is SEC compliant and stuff. So that's a whole thing, and that'll take about 10 months. And then once we've raised that money, about a month or so after that, then we'll go into pre-production. And at the beginning of pre-production, we'll have money to offer directly to agents for certain talent. Because even though we're speaking to agents now and getting them excited about the project and stuff, we know that they're going to say, well, when are we doing that? Like, where's the money? Show me the money. So we've got to raise the money first, then we can make the offers, then we can have like a 4-month or 6-month pre-production in spring next year. And then we're off to the races with a 4 to 6 week shoot, and then we'll have about 6 months of post-production. And I'm pretty excited because I will be a post-production supervisor on that film. Like in the past, I've been the editor, the colorist, the VFX artist, but this time around, I'll be supervising a small team. And that'll take about 6 months. And then roughly in about 2 years from now-ish, we will have the movie done. And then about halfway through production, we'll have a very clear idea on the quality of the movie. Because even though everyone means to make the best movie possible, things happen, right? You're going to film the sunny day and you get there and it's raining, whatever. Things happen. And for whatever reason, sometimes you get movie magic and sometimes the odds are stacked against you and you just can't, the gap gets bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So about halfway through production, we'll have a really good idea of the scale and quality of the film. And that will determine next steps for distribution, marketing, etc.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what you just heard was a plan. that was a plan, and you have to have that because something that you pointed out, which is so important. You may be going to set thinking you're going to get that sunny day, but it's raining.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a plan in place, some contingencies, it could go left very quickly.
Yeah, and you've also got to be mentally nimble to be able to pivot on the day, and it might not be the weather. It might be an actor's hungover, or it might be wardrobe put the wrong thing in the wrong truck and it's out of state. Who knows? But you got to be able to be nimble, flexible, and that's really exciting in production. I like that because you've also got to be thinking 2-3 steps ahead, and that's why it's like 3D chess. But yeah, you gotta have a plan going in, and I think I've mentioned this on your show before. Some of my best plan A's started life as plan B's.
That's the way it happens sometimes, and that's why flexibility is something that you really need in this business. Rigidity will get you in trouble more times than not. If you're so rigid in your thinking and your thought process, because as you said, you may have to pivot. Now, you may not want to pivot, but you got to pivot,
Yeah,
because if
you
you
would
don't
definitely
pivot,
have to pivot. You would definitely have to pivot.
right, right, you definitely have to pivot. And I remember when I was doing my film festival, the big one, and things would come up, and the pivot would have to be in the moment,
Yeah.
because you didn't have time, because the show is going on in 15 minutes. So you better figure it out right now. So, you know what? Let's talk about that really quickly, because we're almost done. The art of the pivot when you are on the set and you are actually in production and you're shooting.
Yeah.
How important is the director being able to pivot, but also having a team that can actually take the direction and pivot and keep everything running smoothly?
Well, I mean, my teams are amazing, and of course that we're a fluid unit. And
Mhm.
if we weren't a fluid unit, they never would have made it to the team in the first place. I worked with the same people again and again and again over years, and we're just a very well-oiled machine. I've directed over 200 national TV commercials. I did 28 last year, and the same crew that I use on TV commercials, I use in my films. So we see shooting TV commercials as a chance to, stretch and go keep ourselves from getting rusty. So we're a really well-oiled machine. Um, but yeah, being able to pivot in the moment. And here's the thing: the reason why the director is the director is because they are the taste maker. They are the ones who decide, should it be blue, should it be green, right? They're the ones who are entrusted by the entire team supporting them that they have good taste, and that they can pick the right tasteful decisions, and then the crew gets behind them. So I don't find it hard to pivot. And you have to do it all the time. There's a million reasons why you could and have to, but you just have to do it. You can't have 30 people staring at you on set and you be like, it's better to make a decision and go with it. But it's funny about saying my best A plans started life as B plans, because usually what I do when I approach production is you want to look at the things that are the fire on the horizon. Okay, I want to know every fire on the horizon, right? If we're going to be shooting on the Tuesday, and we know that the car that we have, one wheel might fall off, then weeks before that, I'm going to be concentrating on getting a car with four good wheels, right? So you want to look at the fires on the horizon and put them out while they're on the horizon, okay? So, but inevitably things happen in the moment, and you have to be able to do that. But I'm usually a few steps ahead.
Mhm.
It's not just, and those fires on the horizon, when I identify them, I come up with an A plan, B plan, C plan, E plan, sometimes F and G, depending on how big of a fire it is on the horizon. And I say to the team, if that elephant doesn't get here in time, we could do CGI, or we could do a donkey and dress it up as an elephant, or we can do two people in a suit, or we can skip the elephant and the scoop. And we discuss all the ideas that I have of alternatives.
Mhm.
And so you try and really eliminate those fires on the horizon, but sometimes you still go into battle with a 1, 2, 3 plans for each thing.
Wow, that was amazing. This has been an absolute masterclass. And again, I really enjoyed the documentary. It was really eye-opening, and I just love learning, things that I don't know, and listening to each of the extremely qualified bartenders talk about the profession, because I think a lot of people get that twisted. They don't consider it, because again, I just never saw it that way. And the fact that they talked about it being a sport, and things like that. That was real. That was really eye opening. And I'm like, you know what? They are extremely dedicated. Having to practice 5, 6, 7 hours a day just to be able to do this and to be able to do it at such a high level was very eye opening. So that was a phenomenal documentary, and everybody, you really need to check it out when it comes out, because even if
It's out. It's out
oh,
now.
I'm sorry, it's out now. So tell everybody where they can find it again so they can go watch.
Sure. FlairDocumentary.com or shakenandstirredthemovie.com.
So that's Flair the documentary,
FlairDocumentary.com
FlairDocumentary.com.
or shakenandstirredthemovie.com.
So, ladies and gentlemen, those two things will be in the show notes, but make sure that you go and check out this amazing documentary, because you will really learn something about Flair bartending. And here's the thing: once you watch the documentary, if you just happen to be out and about and you're in a bar and you see the bartender actually back there doing their thing, you can sit there and say, hey, you know what? I know what it really takes to actually do that. That doesn't happen overnight. So you'll be a little knowledgeable, and you can sit there and impress your friends at the bar on how that thing really works.
And I guarantee you, if you say to a bartender, if you watch the movie and then you go and tell a bartender, have you seen the movie Shaken and Stirred? You're either going to turn them on to it and they're going to buy you a drink, or they're going to be so excited that you know it, they're going to buy you a drink. So watch the movie and go tell bartenders.
And get a free drink.
Get a free drink.
So where can people find you, Miss Richards?
Well, I'm very Googleable, as you know, but I did start a YouTube channel like a little over a month ago, which is very curious for me. It's actually youtube.com/at director Deborah Richards. I put out videos almost 5 days a week, and they run from 30 minutes to 3-hour videos every day. And it's basically just like being with me on a day trip to work, and you're here with me at work, and every day is a little different, but I show you the realities of being an independent film director. There's no glam. It's long form, it's raw, it's unfiltered, it's the real deal. And I think it's kind of interesting. I'm really kind of feeling my way into it, so it's a new thing for me. But I wanted to have something to look back on in 10 years from now. And because when I'm in the daily battle of it and in the trenches, it's a lot of pressure and a lot of hard work. But I guarantee you, in 10 years' time, I'll look back on this and say that was the happiest time of my life.
Yeah, YouTube is a phenomenal platform. So give them that channel one more time so they can go and watch, because if you're a filmmaker, you need to be subscribed to this channel. So can you give that to them one more time?
Sure, youtube.com/at director Deborah Richards.
Make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you wrote down both websites for Shaken and Stirred, because again, it is a phenomenal documentary. You will really learn a lot about Flair bartending and all the nuances. And before we go, one of the funniest things about that documentary was when the gentleman was talking about how hot Fridays used to be.
Mm-hmm.
I said, that is so hilarious. Who would have thought that Fridays used to be the spot?
Fridays was, for a while, Fridays was the biggest bar restaurant chain in the world.
Wow.
Fridays, at the beginning of Cocktail, that first bar you see that was really busy when he's doing the hippie shake and all that,
Mhm.
that was the first TGI Fridays from I believe, Lower Manhattan.
Wow.
And the first Fridays in the late 60s, I think, it was kind of the start of the singles revolution, and it would have a line out the door.
Wow.
So Fridays has a huge heritage in the Flair bartending world. And when I worked at TGI Fridays in South London, it was 4 deep. It was like John Bandy said. And the funny thing is, about 6 months ago, I got word that the people at HQ at TGI Fridays were nervous about this film because they didn't know what I was going to say about them.
Mm.
And I was like, holy moly, TGI Fridays know about me and my film?
Wow. That is amazing. But I thought that was pretty funny because they make some good burgers. I like Fridays, but it was really interesting to hear that Fridays used to be that spot. But
Oh,
again, that
so much so. Like I
yeah.
think for years in the hospitality industry, the
Mhm.
most feared job in the world was the GM of the TGI Fridays in Moscow.
Wow. Wow. That is amazing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you have gotten a masterclass. Please listen to this a few times, because it was a great conversation, but also because Deborah is such a phenomenal filmmaker and she really knows what she's doing. So if this is something that you decided that you want to do, this is one of the best podcasts to listen to learn how to do it the right way. I always talk about, if you're going to do this, listen to people that know what they're talking about, and these are the type of guests that we have on our show. And again, with Deborah being a returning guest, there's a reason that she came back. She will definitely be on again because I just like talking to her. She's so phenomenal. But again, please make sure that you follow Deborah Richards on all her platforms. Make sure that you go and check out Shaken and Stirred. Please, please subscribe to her YouTube channel. If filmmaking is something that you are truly interested in learning how to do the right way. And before we go, Miss Richards, any parting words for our audience?
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing space. This has been so much fun. If you guys do watch Shaken and Stirred, please write an honest review at imdb.com. That really helps us out because when it goes on Amazon, for every review we get, the algorithm will show the movie to another 10 people. So that would be really, really helpful. But Floyd, thank you to you and your listeners. It's a pleasure to see you, and always love chit chatting. And if you haven't, go buy this book.
That's a good book.
It's a
That's a
good
good
book.
book. That's a good book. But
But
yeah, again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining myself and the amazing Deborah Richards on another episode of A Conversation With. And you can follow us on all streaming platforms and head over to the YouTube channel, Floyd Marshall Jr., again on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe because along with this interview, Deborah's first interview is on there as well, which is an amazing interview. And you also have some other amazing filmmakers who it's just a free master class, which is always good. If you ain't got to pay for it, you can learn something. That's always a great upside. But again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining myself, Miss Deborah Richards, on A Conversation With. And as always, love it like a hobby, but treat it like a business. Have an absolutely amazing, amazing evening. Peace.